Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, Korea and Russia played to 1-1 draw in their first World Cup match with both countries substitutes scoring in the second half. President Park Geun-hye and Uzbek President Islam Karimov agreed to jointly push ahead with a new $4 billion gas field development business, in addition to energy projects already underway. Plus, global car makers are stepping up efforts to snatch a bigger share in the booming auto market in China, where Ford reported a 50% sales jump in the first quarter. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Wednesday, June 18th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eun Ju.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We start with the World Cup, and of course the big match everyone was watching here in the nation was Korea's first match against Russia in their Group H matchup.
And despite the 1-1 draw to start off Korea's World Cup, it was an exciting match nonetheless. To get the latest on that match and more from the 2014 Brazil World Cup, we now connect with S.J. Lee. Good afternoon, S.J.
Good afternoon to you guys as well. And just like you said, let's begin by talking about the big matchup here everyone was watching here in the nation. Korea versus Russia in their Group H matchup. And taking a look at the highlights here, of course. Now, although Korea looked pretty sloppy in the beginning of the match, they kicked it up a notch in the latter half of the first half as they played very aggressively in the rest of the first half. Now still tied 1-0. Check that in. The first goal came from Lee Keun-ho, who subbed in for Park Chu-young in the second half as Korea took the lead 1-0 in the 68th. But despite the lead, Korea's defense collapses in the 74th minute as Alexander Kurzakov levels the match, giving both nations 1 point each in the 1-1 draw.
Yes, 1-1 draw, and well, what better way really to watch the game than with thousands, tens of thousands of your fellow fans.
I really would have joined that crowd if it weren't for my working hours, but our Kwon-soa was lucky enough to be at one of the many street parties showing this morning's game.
대한민국! 대한민국!
10,000 supporters converged on the streets of Gangnam in southern Seoul to watch Team Korea's first match in the 2014 World Cup against Russia. Yeongdong-daedo Street was one of 26 main cheering locations across the nation. Roads were blocked off the previous evening as people began to stream in the pitch dark. They did not have to wait in silence. Famous Korean singers took the stage in the hours leading up to the beginning of the game. The main event was Korean pop star Psy's performance of his hit songs Gangnam Style, Gentleman, and Champion. The cheers and excitement built up to a fever pitch when the whistle blew for the start of the game, and of course when Lee Keun-ho scored his goal in the second half.
The atmosphere in Korea is very, very great. We feel it's very, very friendly. And we really, really like it. So, Korea fighting! Korea fighting!
I think that Korea is going to win against Russia. I deserve so.
However, groans echoed throughout the crowd when Russia scored their equalizer. Disappointment over having let the 1-0 lead slip away, but also relief that the team didn't lose their first game and still has a great chance of qualifying for the knockout stage.
I anticipated we will win. I'm disappointed about the draw, but I think we will fare better in the next game.
Koreans have shown once again how they unite behind their nation's football warriors, even if it means getting up at the crack of dawn. Street cheering will start even earlier in the next game against Algeria, which kicks off next Monday, 4 a.m. Korea time. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Now let's connect back with SJ for the other results from the day.
That's right. This is including the match between Algeria and Belgium. SJ, give us the details on the other two matches.
Sure thing. Now, of course, Algeria and Belgium match was a big match for those following Group H, since they're the other two teams that Korea will end up facing off against. So let's take a look at the highlights. Of course, Belgium, the heavy favorites going into this match, but in the first half, Algeria gets the penalty call as Sofan Feghouli converts the spot kick in the 25th minute for the 1-0 lead. Looked like Algeria was going to get the upset win, but Man United's Fellaini sends one past the goalkeeper. 1-1. Now a draw is not bad, right? Well, not so fast as Dries Mertens, as he gives Belgium the 2-1 lead in the 80th minute and the win 2-1. Meanwhile, Brazil and Mexico facing off in their second match in Group A. Mexican goalkeeper Guillermo Ochoa with several key saves in the match as both nations surprised everyone with a 0-0 draw. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Now, although many here in Korea chose to join the cheering crowd outdoors for today's match, many others decided to stay home or in their offices to watch the game as it started at 7 a.m. Korea time.
Yeah, it's too early to go out partying, really, but Kim Ji-yeon tells us how this has affected the marketing practices of local beer and electronics companies, which normally launch these huge promotional events in the run-up to the World Cup.
The cheering for Team Korea at the World Cup continues, albeit a bit more subdued volume compared to years past, partly due to the lingering grief from April's Seoul ferry disaster and the time difference between Korea and Brazil. Both factors have an effect on industries that are accustomed to seeing sales soar during the World Cup.
The liquor industry is just starting to promote their products this month since the nation has been grieving the Seoul disaster. Also, a lot of the World Cup games are taking place during the early hours of the morning here in Korea, so it's less likely fans will drink alcoholic beverages while watching the games.
While the alcohol industry is slumping, television makers boasting bigger and better screens are appealing for those who will be watching with their family and friends. Major manufacturers like Samsung and LG Electronics have slashed prices for their ultra-high-definition TVs, screens that make the grass look greener and the players seem closer. Sales of Samsung's UHD TV soared more than 30% in the last week of May compared to the week earlier. LG also saw its TV sales quadruple in May from January this year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Korea and Uzbekistan have agreed to push for new joint energy projects as the two countries seek to deepen and diversify their political, economic, and cultural ties. The deals were inked during a meeting Tuesday between Korean President Park Geun-hye and Uzbek President Islam Karimov in Tashkent. Arirang News' Choi Yoo-sun, who is traveling with the president, filed this report.
President Park and her Uzbek counterpart Islam Karimov agreed to continue cooperation in joint projects worth more than $8 billion, such as Uzbek's gas field development and chemical complex construction. They also sought ways to expand their economic cooperation in the areas of energy, textiles, and transportation. Seoul asked for Tashkent's support in helping Korean businesses take part in a $4 billion Uzbek gas and processing plant development and in the construction of a $300 million solar plant in Samarkand.
한국 기업들은 우즈베키스탄 경제의 성장 잠재력에 주목하고 대규모 자원 개발 및 건설 인프라 투자 등 다양한 분야의 참여를 희망하고 있습니다.
Korea helping to develop an Uzbek electronic government administrative system and Korean firms participating in an Uzbek highway construction were also discussed.
Korea is a strategic partner that has built an immense economy and knowledge in science and technology.
Seoul signed a deal to build a textile complex in Uzbekistan, which is the world's #6 cotton producer. The Uzbek leader also endorsed President Park's trust-building process with North Korea, as well as a Eurasia initiative reconnecting energy and logistics infrastructure from the Far East to Europe to lay the groundwork for regional peace and to change the global economic system. The next stop on President Park's Eurasia Initiative campaign tour is Samarkand, a city that was at the heart of the Silk Road. She'll then travel to Kazakhstan Wednesday for a 3-day state visit. Choi Yusun, Arirang News, Tashkent.
And back here in Seoul, President Park's embattled nominee for Prime Minister Moon Chang-guk has been the center of attention on the first day of a 3-day hearing at the National Assembly. Earlier this Wednesday morning, lawmakers of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy questioned the government's plan to go ahead with Moon's nomination, despite backlash over controversial remarks he made about Japan's colonization of Korea. Ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers, meanwhile, remain firm that the confirmation hearing should go ahead as scheduled, as the Assembly has a duty to screen the candidate. The government's lax response to the Seoul ferry disaster in April was also criticized by opposition lawmakers. Oceans and Fisheries Minister Lee Keun-ho, who attended the interpellation session, said the government is doing all it can to recover the bodies of the 12 people who remain unaccounted for. And over in Japan, there are growing protests against the Abe administration's move to present a draft statement that would effectively allow Tokyo to exercise the long-prohibited right to come to the military aid of an ally under attack. On Tuesday, over 5,000 people gathered at a downtown park in Tokyo to urge the government not to revise Article 9 of the Constitution, which prohibits Japan from the right to collective self-defense. Now, the Abe administration apparently wants the cabinet approve the change before the current Diet session ends Sunday. But Prime Minister Abe's Liberal Democratic Party coalition party, New Komeito, says it will be hard to come to an agreement by then, as his party members have not started discussions on the draft.
China's auto market is booming. First quarter sales were up 12% year over year, and Korean automakers were in the mix. But as our Na Hyung-kyung reports, they've got some work to do to take full advantage of this surge.
The world's largest automobile market is growing at a fast pace. The Korea Automotive Research Institute says more than 4.5 million cars were sold in China in the first quarter of this year, a 12% increase compared to the same period last year. The most sought-after brand was German carmaker Volkswagen, with sales at around 950,000 units, followed by America's General Motors and Korea's Hyundai-Kia Automotive Group. But the company that had the most exponential growth was Ford. First quarter sales of the American automaker surged more than 50% year over year, while Hyundai-Kia showed growth hovering around 10%. Analysts say the Korean automaker needs to build a fourth production plant capable of producing 300,000 units annually within the next 2 years if it wants to reap the benefits of China's booming car market. And Korea's leading auto parts maker Hyundai Mobis is doing better in China as well, contributing to becoming the world's 6th biggest player in the industry, climbing 2 positions up from last year. US-based auto magazine Automotive News says Hyundai Mobis posted revenue of nearly $25 billion in 2013, showing 16% year-over-year growth, while other top 10 firms showed a growth average of 6%. Market watchers say the rise of Hyundai Mobis may have started with the stellar performances of its parent Hyundai Motor Company in the 2000s, but they attribute the steady and gradual growth to the firm's improved price competitiveness as well as the free trade pacts that Korea signed with the US and the EU. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, Korean firm POSCO has been named the world's top steelmaker for the 5th year in a row. Among 36 global steelmakers surveyed, information service provider World Steel Dynamics gave POSCO the highest marks globally. The company's technological innovation, human resources management and value-added rolled steel were pointed out as the core reasons for the #1 ranking. Small US steelmaker Nucor Corporation came in second in the survey, while Korea's Hyundai Steel cracked the top 10 for the first time ever, ranking 9th. The OECD is advising Korea to carefully consider both the costs and benefits of accumulating even more foreign currency reserves. It says that collecting record stockpiles of cash for a rainy day, like it is doing now, is an extremely expensive form of insurance. Hwang Jie has this report.
The OECD has told Korea to take a careful approach to more foreign reserves. In its latest report on the Korean economy released Tuesday, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said that foreign exchange reserves are a costly way to fight against foreign exchange volatility. It said that's because foreign reserves are typically invested in safe assets with low returns. Instead, the international organization recommended swap agreements that allow related parties to exchange cash flows for a set period of time. Korea's central bank said earlier this month that the nation's foreign reserves reached an all-time high of over $360 billion as of the end of last month, marking the seventh largest foreign reserves in the world, following China, Japan, and Switzerland. The OECD report went on to say that the Korean economy is on an upturn trend after a period of subdued output growth in 2011 and 2012, but added that easing monetary policies and short-term extra budget could take place. This when threats to the domestic economy like the nation's household debt problem and instability in emerging markets continue to weigh on Korea. The OECD expects the Korean economy to grow 4% this year and 4.2% next year, and added a strong Korean won trend could benefit local consumers by reducing prices of imported goods and rebalancing toward domestic demand, one of the main economic agendas of the current administration. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this Wednesday afternoon. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news center.
Eunice, U.S. forces have made a major capture, a key suspect in a shocking attack on a U.S. embassy in Libya a couple of years ago.
That's right, Chinju. He's being called the suspected ringleader to that deadly strike in 2012. And U.S. President Barack Obama warns he will face the full weight of American justice in the courts. Here's Kim Hyun-bin with the story.
The United States announced on Tuesday that it has captured the suspected ringleader of the 2012 attack on the U.S. diplomatic compound in the Libyan city of Benghazi. The attack killed 4 Americans, including the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens. U.S. President Barack Obama authorized the operation on Sunday that captured Ahmed Abu Khattala inside of Libya. Khattala will now be transported back to the U.S. Obama stressed that terrorists that harm Americans will be brought to justice.
We continue to think about and pray for the families of those who were killed during that terrible attack. But more importantly, it's important for us to send a message to the world that when Americans are attacked, no matter how long it takes, we will find those responsible and we will bring them to justice.
A U.S. official said Khattala is currently being held on a U.S. military ship in an undisclosed location. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, says Special Operations Forces and the FBI successfully carried out a dangerous and complex capture mission, resulting in no casualties. Khattala is expected to be charged and prosecuted through the U.S. court system and will not be sent to the infamous Guantanamo Bay facility. The decision follows past practice and is in line with Obama's policy of prosecuting suspected militants caught abroad through the U.S. justice system. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now over to Iraq, where Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki broadcast a joint appeal for national unity, a change in stance from earlier when he snubbed calls from the West to reach out to the Sunnis in the country. Iraq remains in bitter battle against a Sunni insurgency led by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Militants were engaged in a fight for the city of Baquba, less than 45 minutes away from the capital of Baghdad. Police and local officials say the militants made great advances, but the city has not yet fallen. Extra troops were also dispatched to protect oil refineries. The Baiji refinery north of Baghdad was shut down, with foreign workers being evacuated by helicopter. 15 people are dead and 12 women abducted following a raid on 2 coastal villages in Kenya. The attack comes just days after a strike on hotels and a police station at nearby Mpakatoni that left some 50 people killed. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is blaming local political networks for the fresh deadly attacks, though Somalia's Al-Shabaab group had earlier said it was responsible. China and the UK are set to boost business ties to the tune of $30 billion and perhaps even more. At a meeting with British Prime Minister David Cameron in London, China's Premier Lee Keun-ho proposed boosting cooperation between their two countries by $100 billion next year in areas such as nuclear power and high-speed railway. Premier Lee is expected to sign a set of 40 agreements during his 3-day trip that spans from infrastructure investments to the finance sector. This year marks the 10th anniversary of China and Britain's comprehensive strategic partnership.
Now, it wasn't all that long ago that we were talking about how booming, how exciting the Korean film industry is. But it looks like after a very good 2013, Korean movies this year have lost a bit of their luster. Shin Se-min reports.
Korean movies have been less popular than Hollywood movies in the domestic market so far this year, turning over a trend that's developed in recent years. No Tears for the Dead and Man on High Heels are Korean movies that were released earlier this month and star well-established actors like Chang Dong-gun and Cha Sung-won. Despite being produced by entertainment giants CJ Entertainment and Lotte Entertainment, they have failed to receive much attention. According to the Korean Film Council on Tuesday, No Tears for the Dead and Man on High Heels have so far attracted 570,000 and 310,000 viewers respectively, which pales in comparison to the Hollywood action movie Edge of Tomorrow, which has drawn 3 million. In 2012, ticket sales for domestic movies surpassed the 100 million mark for the first time, and for 2 consecutive years, Korean films were more popular than those from Hollywood. In the first half of 2014, Hollywood movies got the better of Korean films by 5.6 percentage points. Experts say Korean movies are suffering from the lack of a major hit. Miss Granny, released in January, is the only one that qualifies so far after drawing more than 4 million viewers. There were 4 of these super hits all of last year. Film critic Chung Ji-wook thinks the reason may be a lack of creativity. Whereas films last year tapped into creative concepts, he says domestic films so far this year have depended more on their star power. With the year nearly half over, there are concerns that the domestic film market may not surpass the 100 million mark. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
You can only see Koreans wearing the country's traditional hanbok clothing on special occasions these days, at weddings or on traditional holidays. But not that long ago, Koreans from all walks of life wore it on a day-to-day basis. Our Park Chu-young today reports on a new center that aims to breathe new life into this traditional attire.
People wearing traditional Korean hanbok clothing gather at Seoul Station 2A4, a former train station turned art gallery. They have descended here in their special attire to celebrate the launch of the Hanbok Advancement Center, a governmental center with an aim of promoting the traditional clothing.
We are very grateful that a center whose sole aim is to promote hanbok has finally been established.
With the establishment of the Hanbok Center, the government hopes it pumps new life into the nation's dying culture of wearing the traditional clothing.
The center aims to make hanbok, which is the symbol of Korean culture, something the public wants to buy and wear, so that ultimately we can share the culture with the world.
The center will launch diverse projects to promote hanbok, including hosting educational classes on the traditional attire and holding designer contests that discover new takes on hanbok. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.